Before we get started today, I want to give a quick shout out to our headline sponsor, Stuut Technologies. Every week on this show, I talk to operators who are crushing it on the service side, but still chasing down payments. That cash flow gap is brutal when you're trying to scale your business. That's why I wanted to tell you about Stuut. Stuut is the AI platform that does accounts receivable work instead of just assisting with it. Their CEO, Tarek, actually came from TQL, so he gets how logistics companies operate. I've known him for years, and I truly trust what he's building. What Stuut does is simple. Their AI actually collects your receivables for you, not some software that just helps you chase the payments. It literally does the work. It's up and running in days, not months. As an example, Bishop Lifting is using Stuut for a 35% reduction in overdue invoices, millions more in working capital, and a reduction of manual work by 50%. If you're tired of your AR eating up time and cash, check out Stuut.ai. That's STUUT.ai. Tell them you heard about it on the Freight Pod. They'll get you collecting in days, not months, so you can focus on actually running your business. Now let's get this episode started. Welcome back to another episode of the Freight Pod. I'm your host, Andrew Silver, joined today by Mr. Alan Holland from across the pond. Welcome. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, Andrew. Thank you for having me.
And where are you joining us from?
I'm based in Cork and on the south coast of Ireland. So it's just after St. Patrick's Day here. So I'm good for all well rested.
Are you feeling the after effects of a well-celebrated holiday?
I'm lucky. I've got young kids, so I just celebrated differently than when I was younger. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to have you on the show. Your company, Keelvar, is one that I'm fairly familiar with from my days as a freight broker, working with a ton of the enterprise shippers who use your product. And there's just so much that we could talk about, from running a business in Ireland that serves thousands of global enterprises across the world to kind of AI in today's world, which I know is something that you're very familiar with. So to get started, though, I'd love to learn as much as I can about you, Alan, the individual. Take me back, before you got into the freight world. Can you give me some of your journey of how you got here?
I guess I started off my career. I did a degree in computer engineering and then went to an AI research lab. So I was lucky that there was one of the world's top AI researchers set up a new lab here in Cork, right on our doorstep. So he was Marvin Minsky's student, right? So he was right he came from MIT, and one of the godfathers of AI, right? So he was bringing the world's best top AI researchers here with him, and I was the first PhD student, so I really just got lucky in that setting. But I don't think I was your classical academic. I came from, my family had their own business. There was a chemical. They had their own startup. It was a chemical company, and I used to have to fund my PhD student days by working night times for them, and they as a poor PhD student, and so I kind of got to see what the freight world looked like by seeing how bulk chemicals were being moved around and how much it cost and how essential to profitability it was to do that well when you're a manufacturing business. So by day, I was in an AI research lab collaborating and having trips to Palo Alto, collaborating with Google on auction platforms for selling sponsored search. So you got to see how AI was being embedded in monetization of the world of e-commerce, collaborating with Amazon on how to price goods they were selling in their marketplaces. So very sophisticated e-commerce solutions by day, and then by night, helping my parents respond to procurement teams who are buying chemicals and trying to build in freight costs into your pricing. So that's how I'd say that's the yin and the yang, if you like, the night and day, literally, of the world of e-commerce and B2B commerce. So kind of got an insight into just how different they were, and in some ways, how e-commerce had this huge advantage in having kind of just a greenfield site in the early 2000s. How are you going to design your business strategy in a way that's efficient? Whereas B2B had solutions that were designed to digitize paper-based processes. And I could see that I'm going to have to solve this. This is an itch I'm going to have to scratch. And so I started scratching it by looking at, okay, what should the world of B2B doing? Given that it is more complex than e-commerce. You're not just selling books or sponsored search advertising slots. You're selling, in B2B, you're selling dangerous chemicals, or it could be perishable fruit, or whatever your line of business is. It's got different constraints, and there's a lot more constraints on the physical world that you've got to respect. So how do you bring the speed and efficiency of e-commerce to the real world, atoms, things moving around? So that became my life's work, really. First of all, starting researching how should it be done, and then seeing it not done well, getting frustrated looking at software vendors who are not doing this well, and saying, I'm going to have to go out there and show them how it should be done. So that's how Keelvar started.
So this was this was like around 2010. Like, what was the timing of all of this that was going on between you studying?
I did a PhD in 2002 through 2005, and I became a lecturer, and I was teaching AI in university, and but also starting to collaborate with I was starting to publish papers on saying, look, this is how you should run more advanced kind of auctions for buying vehicle fleet or electricity, or facilities management. And then I started to get companies knocking on my door, and they were saying, you can see how you helped the city council in Cork get their 6 million on vehicle fleet spend down to 5 million by just having package bidding and conditional discounts. Like, one company had hundreds of millions in vehicle fleet. They wanted to do the same thing. So it was a very large corporation, one of, say, the world's top 50. And so I did a pilot project with them when I was in university, and showed how you could actually get a 6 billion spend down to 5 billion. And Cork City, so project number 1 was getting 6 million spend down to 5 million. Project number 2 was 6 billion.
6 billion down to 5 billion.
So it was at the same, I would say, the same percentages in terms of efficiencies, by just allowing small players play to their strengths, medium-sized play to their strengths, and the large players play to their. So if you allow everyone play to their strengths and win what they really want to win, not win stuff they know they're not good at and will actually prefer not to do. But oftentimes they just feel beholden to putting their arms around everything so they can keep people out. So if you can kind of design your negotiating mechanism well, you can actually make space for small, medium, and large players. Because in the Cork City Council's case, it's a good example of companies just focusing on electric vehicles. And this is early days, so it was like golf carts and these mini cleaners that would go down small side streets and sweep. And that's all it is. But they'd never been able to win business with the City Council. And now they suddenly did, because you're kind of breaking it down into smaller contracts and allowing businesses to carve it out. Like the tipping trucks, I'll do that. Commercial vehicles and vans and cars and specialist players would do that. And I would say, on balance, everyone was happy. Suppliers were happy. The council was happy. And the same thing with these very large corporations, where they can't have that level. When you've got hundreds of thousands of items you're buying, you just can't form a human relationship with suppliers in the same way. You can't understand exactly what their preferences might be. So you've got to set up a system so that they're allowed to play to their strengths. And even more importantly, tell you what they don't want. Because very often you end up bundling, and this is a kind of, I would say, a trap that a lot of procurement teams fall into. They end up bundling the big bundles in ways that suppliers go, oh, I love A, B, and C, but why do I have to do D? I'm no good at D. And they prefer to kind of resell it to somebody else. But what ends up happening is the friction of doing that is that it's like they just do a bad job and just say, that's it.
What's really interesting is that example you use. While I know nothing about the Cork City Council and that procurement event, the example is really relatable to a freight broker. And just thinking about the number of times I've gone through procurement events where a couple of the things you said feel so true. Like one is, I just remember thinking, I want this shipper to understand what I'm really good at and what my desires are and what I don't want. But, and you said hundreds of thousands, even in the case where they've only got 40 or 50 providers, it's really hard for them to have a systemic way of understanding what do I want versus what does he want versus what does that broker want? What are we really good at? So I guess part of my question is, you talk about it like the solution is, or the end game is that all the providers, small, medium, large, are getting the piece of the pie that makes the most sense for them. But I guess my question is like, is that a product of creating the right system that allows that information to come to the forefront? Or is it about changing the behavior of the players like myself and how we show up into the event?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, but I would say most important thing is because the buyer tends to set the rules, right, around like, this is the rules of the game. They define what game theory is called. They're a mechanism designer, right? And mechanism design is like inverse game theory. How do I set up the rules of a game so those that are playing in their, I suppose, in game theory we call it self-interested profit maximizers, right? Which sounds very utilitarian, but that's what each business is, right?
It sounds like the perfect way to describe it. That's what we're doing. Self-interested profit maximization. Yeah. Maybe you could argue it's not necessarily just self-interested, because I know that for my self-interest to be maximized, I need to maximize your self-interest too. So there's some kind of duality there, but you are kind of describing it perfectly.
So like that's the premise of game theory, right? And that, I used to teach that in university, right? So it's like if you just assume that everyone is going to be a self-interested profit maximizer, then you should set up the rules of the game so that they have an interest to communicate the truth, or as close to the truth. It's what game theory is called incentive compatible. So like Google did that really well, right? And this is why what Google did is instructive to the rest of commerce, right? So they set up an auction scheme where, let's say you're bidding on legal services in Chicago, right? And you were bidding $10 a click, and you could spend this on Yahoo or you could spend it on Google. Now on Yahoo, the rules were you pay what you bid. So you'd be paying $10 per click. And then you'd figure out, the second highest was $9. So I'm going to put it down to $9.01. But the second guy saw that you put it at $9.01, he's going $9.02. And then you go $9.03 every day, right? So everyone is coming back every day, changing their bids. So there's lots of noise in the Yahoo system. What Google did was said, we're not going to charge you $10. Even though you bid 10, we're going to charge you the second highest. So we're going to charge you the 9, even though you bid 10, right? So this is an example of an incentive compatible auction where you could just set and go, look, 10 is actually the maximum I'll be willing to spend. So what advertisers did was they said, Yahoo, that's a noisy mess. The cost of actually running our ad campaigns there is high. So I'm going to shift it all over to Google. So Google defeated Yahoo and all other search engines. They had good quality search results, but that's not where they really defeated the rest of the market. It's the auction protocol they used, which is a smart auction protocol, which was it revealed truthful preferences for small, medium, and large players better than the others. And what they also did was they gave incentives for quality adverts. So they ranked who would win the top based on your bid amount times the expected click-through rate. So now if you had an ad for, let's say it was marketing services, and you're just bidding on legal services, people wouldn't be clicking on it, so it would fall down the rankings. So even if you were paying a high price per click, it would still fall down the rankings if it wasn't relevant. So it's a little like, say, a freight provider, you're being very competitive in your pricing, but you're not delivering on time. Your performance is poor. So you need a mechanism when buying freight so that you shouldn't have to expend a lot of effort when bidding. Instead, you should make it simple. And if you're good at what you do, you win. But if you're not, if you're cheap, but you're not operationally effective, you don't win. So what you need is optimization of the auction format. So I would say our mission has been to bring that type of, I would say, speed and efficiency of e-commerce to various spend categories in world of B2B, freight being, I say, among one of the best adopters. I think that's because they recognized early on they couldn't use Excel for the big strategic sourcing projects. It would break. It was just too slow, time consuming, and error prone, and you couldn't get the type of package bids and conditional discounts. So Buyside started, of all of the spend categories, this logistics procurement teams became the best at applying sourcing optimization. So we took some of those teams who got really good at applying good standards in their strategic negotiations to say, now, your agents, right? Your agents should do your tactical bids as well and do hundreds or thousands of these, all the spot bids. And what they should do is start applying intelligent mechanisms in their negotiations with with all your carriers, and you should equip your carriers with bidding agents to respond. So just like advertisers for Google, they're not in every single keyword working out what we should bid for legal service in Chicago, legal service in San Diego, and whatnot. They set up rules around their budget, their capacity, their strategy, and that's the direction of travel. We're not there yet in terms of machine-to-machine negotiations, but it's getting there. It's getting there quite quickly. I would say this year there will be, I would say by middle of the year, I'd be disappointed if it was much later in September this year. We'll have quite a number of customers doing very, I would say, equally sophisticated clearing of freight matching as Google do with their AdWords.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Let's give a quick shout out to our sponsor, CloneOps.ai. Logistics moves fast. There are calls to make, updates to send, documents to track. Your customers are always waiting. CloneOps.ai helps teams stay ahead with a platform that can be white labeled and a marketplace of AI agents built for real logistics operations. Inside the CloneOps marketplace, you'll find agents for tracking, documents, after-hours support, finance workflow, fraud prevention, and more. These agents plug into your workflows and existing systems to handle the repetitive tasks, whether it's making calls, sending emails, replying to texts, gathering info, or writing updates. Your team stays in control with real-time visibility into every interaction. And because the AI is always turned on, operations keeps moving even when your team can't. A standout is Carrier Screening Plus Voice ID, which ties a voice to a DOT number and alerts your team when that same voice appears across different or multiple DOT numbers, helping catch fraudsters before they cause damage. No one else has this. And for companies building a long-term AI strategy, CloneOps.ai gives you the ability to white label, build, own, and control every AI use case across your business. And this team is run by David Bell, founder and leader who I've known for years, a good friend of mine, and someone who, frankly, anything he touches in this industry turns to gold. I trust him with what he's building here. If you're ready for automation that supports your people, visit cloneops.ai. Now let's get back to the show. So your expectation is, and I'll give you some extra time, by the end of this year, you expect that a lot of the shippers using your platform essentially will be negotiating transportation with minimal, I'm trying to use the right words here, minimal human interaction.
Say minimal tactical interaction. Like if you look at, say, the advertising agencies on Google, every day they're looking at the advertising platform and figuring out what their strategy ought to be. But they're not in there bid on this one thing or bid on this other thing. That they shouldn't be that low down in the weeds. They should be monitoring their utilization rates and their operational performance relative to margins, and deciding what's the right amount of business to be winning with these various customers. Whether they, and even strategic feedback from the system as to where you should be increasing the size of your fleet here, and others should be decreasing the size of their fleet, right? So there's I would say there's advice that could be given back to some of these carriers around right sizing or relocating. There may be some regions where margins are higher and they don't even realize it. This is the thing, that you're complex networks. So there's a lot of businesses flying blind, and they're just looking at the aggregate performance of their fleet rather than optimizing where should our trucks be based, which customers are most profitable, which are rewarding. Because sometimes it's very frustrating to be really good at your business and you don't get rewarded. And some customers are bad customers. There's bad buyers out there who just want the lowest price all the time. Well, sometimes it's better to just cut them. And if they're not rewarding you for being good, you go elsewhere and go to customers that build in feedback loops in which good carriers get rewarded. And it's almost a case of demanding that from them. They got to do that for you, because if they're expecting good performance, you need to be rewarded for that good performance. And in my experience, most suppliers, they really want to do a good job, and they hate it when you set up a mechanism that just rewards lowest price, because they know that a shady character who's willing to do a poor job is going to win that business, and actually they'll do more damage to the shipper and to the market, and that really it's up to buyers to be building in these kind of feedback loops where you're connecting your buying system to the transport management systems they're operating in their business, so that you know who's good, who's bad, reward those who are good, punish those who are bad, and be happy to give more margin to those who are good, because that's what really drives your business success. So that's what we feel is efficiency in a market. And that's how you make something win-win. And that's kind of a core value of our business. How do we make things win-win?
So you just said something that I was actually thinking and was going to ask. But there's a lot that you said that I resonate with. First of all, when I was running my own brokerage, you used a term earlier, or you said something earlier that hit perfectly, which was how we ran our business, which was like we were under the impression that every one of our shippers was responsible for making the rules to their own game, which is what you said. And those are the exact words I used to use with my team, is like, all we can control is the service and the price we provide to these shippers. We don't make the rules for them. They make the rules, and we decide if we're willing to play by those rules. It is incumbent on us. It's more important than ever that we are able to learn from the outcomes of those rules and how we play within them. Because if we're going to provide this premium level of service to a shipper, and they're not going to reward that, and they're going to keep taking good lanes away from us because someone came in and offered them cheaper, we need to stop providing that level of service to them, or provide the level of service that they want. If they just want the cheapest price and they don't care that we hold that price for 3 months or 6 months, they give them the cheapest price for today, knowing that we'll change it tomorrow if that's the rule that they want to play by. Now, I say all that to say this. Um, it has sometimes been really challenging to understand the rules the shippers are playing by because they seem to change them, or there's not necessarily transparent communication back and forth. You don't know why all of a sudden a load disappeared. And one of the things I was thinking about was how important the technology is to create a system where both sides have transparent communication and transparent understanding of the rules. And the thing I was thinking was like, well, Keelvar in my mind is a sourcing system, but isn't necessarily, and this is where I hope you can give me more info, isn't necessarily clued in on whether Molo's the best provider or Arrive or Knight Swift or whoever. And so I'm curious, like, you mentioned the sourcing system connecting in with the
Yeah.
TMS. And I'm curious, like, has that been an evolution in the business where now when sourcing events are happening, there is a lot more tied in information and data that tells you how to stack rank players and who's good at
And
what?
this is I would say only it's a relatively small number of shippers that have started doing this, and this is where we're trying to get the market to. Is we've got to hook up the operational performance metrics with the sourcing system, so that you can kind of jointly optimize, right, and reward the best shippers, right. That's the key. They've been trying to do that a bit too manually, and for most big shippers, it's just
Mm-hmm.
overwhelmingly large volume of data, and they don't necessarily do it well. And what they need to be more focused on is kind of the policies and aggregate levels of performance rather than a lane by lane analysis. So, but that I would say that's a key part of the feedback loop now. So, and that's what's kind of, I would say, on the buy side, that's what's happening. It started happening a few months ago, but as we move through the year, we'll move through more of our shippers. Some of them haven't even started using agents yet, to automate. So there's some laggards who still running things very manually. Um, but it's so obvious now that agents are better at doing this for all the tactical, kind of fast-paced bids, that it doesn't make sense anymore. But some companies just are playing catch up on that. But the leaders are integrating with TMS systems and then starting to, I would say, have an enriched view. And that's the importance of having agents run sourcing events over a sourcing optimizer, because it's the optimizer that can. An optimizer is not about optimizing cost. It's actually about optimizing the balance between price and non-price objectives. So it's about being deliberate in weighing up the value of on-time performance. And for most big shippers, on-time performance it, it's more important than the price, because if you got things like perishable goods, or you've got shelves running empty because you're out of stock, that's why it's so important to get that data integrated into your decisions, because they'll be willing to pay a premium, but they need to have, I would say, the calculation engine all hooked up to automate the consideration of on-time performance, in particular of all the non-price objectives. So that's on-time performance is so critical to many big shippers. And then there's some with durable goods who care, if they happen to care less about inventory, so they'll be more price sensitive. But there's many shippers out there that are more time sensitive.
How much more challenging is it to understand the, like, you can't understand the true cost of a lane unless you understand on time performance in some cases. So if you've got any vendor of Walmart, for example, it's the best example, largest example, but any vendor of Walmart, if you're not hitting a certain threshold of on time, then you're paying a percentage of a fine that is equivalent to like a percentage of the retail value of the goods. And so I'm curious how your system how you can systemically create a process that takes into account that kind of hypothetical. That's like, if you're at 95% on time or 98% on time, there's zero fine costs. But if you're at 94% on time, there's a fine cost equivalent to 3% of the retail value of the truck.
Yeah.
Like, those are made up numbers. But I'm curious, how do you think about that in terms of like creating the right optimization system?
Yeah.
When
I would say and this is, I would say, within AI, most people think of AI as like the LLMs we've got present, but there's lots of, I would say, other pillars of AI around managing uncertainty. A kind of key pillar of AI has been optimizing under uncertainty. And there's a lot of work done in terms of the algorithms that an AI agent should be applying when dealing with this kind of uncertainty. So if you've got a cost model for, if my on-time performance drops below X%, I'm going to have this penalty factor of X million dollars or whatever it may be, right? It's if you're trending below that, now your buying decisions should be different. You need to have a higher level of confidence that the remaining shipments you've got are going to get there on time. So you should be willing to pay a premium. I think people have an intuition, like say during a sports game, even, right? So if you're down by a certain number of points and so 10 minutes to go, you're going to take more risk, and you have to shoot 3-pointers, or you have to, whatever it is, your strategy adapts. So you've got these models within the field of AI, like Markov decision process and other stochastic modeling techniques that will inform you, let's say, what you should be willing to pay is a form of insurance, right? So it's to deal with the heightened risk you have now, given that your on-time performance has been, if you're a carrier, that is, if you're it depends on whether you're the shipper, or the carrier in these cases, and who is buying the freight. But you can basically embed these types of algorithms within an agent that knows how to change its attitude to who you deal with based upon performance to date. Because usually the penalties are based on aggregate performance levels over a certain period of time. And there's a capability we call campaign optimization, right? So let's say from buy side, these shippers are also interested they often have clauses within contracts where if they spend X million dollars with a carrier, that they're entitled to some kind of rebate. Now, as the year goes, maybe they're underspending and they're not trending in the right direction. So a similar challenge is to know how much you should bias in favor of this carrier in order to get their spend above the $5 million, so you can get this rebate. So there's I would say, a set of related challenges around campaign optimization that, again, it's not dissimilar to, I would say, Google's AdWords auction, right? Where you've got a budget, someone who's got a budget, an advertiser's got a budget, and they want to spend up to $10,000 per month on these keywords. Google is deciding on a daily basis which of their ads to place, and they'd like to use up the budget, but sometimes they can go over and sometimes they go under, and then they have to adjust their strategy throughout the month. Likewise in logistics, that if there's certain targets that are key, then you've got to adapt your strategy. It gets quite technical in terms of how you can adapt. There's different algorithmic approaches to model that uncertainty. So what we see happening is different flavors in terms of risk appetite. Some people would leave it very late to adapt, and some people would like to course correct earlier. So having controls over those campaigns, how to rebalance and trend in the right direction, it's a matter of taste. And that's, I would say, agent management becomes a skill then, right? So you have to watch and observe your agent and give it direction to say, you're not course correcting quickly enough, or you're course correcting too fast. We'll sort this problem out in the last week if we need to.
It's interesting. For one, it feels like you're kind of the perfect person to be doing the job you're doing. Just given the familial background in what you got to witness with your own family and your chemicals business. And then, I don't know how many people were studying AI 24 years ago, but it certainly is a tenth of a tenth of a tenth of a tenth of a percent of what it is today.
Yeah, it's probably less than 500 worldwide. I probably named first name terms with many of the top 100. Let's say, put it that way.
Let's stay there for a second, because that's just so interesting to me. You were studying AI 24 years ago. 4 years into that study path, what's the right way to ask this? So it's 2006. What did you think the next 10 to 20 years looked like for AI and its advancement? And how close was what you thought to what is now what we're seeing?
It's funny because I didn't set up Keelvar till late 2012 because and we didn't go after agents initially because I knew this is just too futuristic for most. And then when we started doing it in 2020, it was only the most sophisticated businesses that we targeted, who were kind of consciously trying to be on the frontier. But it wasn't until 2025. It was, I suppose, ChatGPT was a moment, right, where everyone kind of decided, geez, this AI is great, and we need more AI. But they also had maybe somewhat of a misconception about what AI was, because that was one branch of AI that was extremely impressive, but it was token prediction at its in its most basic form, right? It was give it a set of input tokens and it will predict the output tokens, right? So
what was staggeringly impressive to the layman's like myself was completely infantile to someone like you who was like, this is as expected at the lowest level.
I think
or am I exaggerating?
No, because I think what was so surprising is, I suppose what I was used to is the AI community not really having the amount of computing resources that OpenAI had. And that was, like, nobody got to see what could you do with a vast amount of computing resources and how would that change the game. And it's difficult to extrapolate. I think for every human mind, it's actually, whether you've been in the field of AI and computing or mathematics your whole life or not, extrapolating what happens on the y-axis as you go out. we were used to supercomputers in the lab, and that, but this was they were tiny compared to what OpenAI had access to. So when you take and you go way out on the x-axis, then of computing power, and then go up, it's very hard to guess where that lands, and when it's on an exponential. And it is like when I was using ChatGPT first, like I was predicting to my kids what I should be able to do, and then you start giving more sophisticated things. You go, oh wow, actually, this surprised me. I wasn't expecting it to be able to help me with asking questions about, say, medical diagnosis and very technical subjects. Like, wow, it's got access to the whole. They really did get access to the whole web here. They did things that, and they got every textbook. So these were things that, like copyright law, was like out the window, and they'd ingested everything. So I guess there was assumptions, or incorrect, right, that you'd never be able to get that much data and that much computing power. That has now changed the game. So now, as soon as they did that and just like crossed red lines and so on, that if they'd done it slowly, somebody might have stopped them. But they did it suddenly. And when they released it, it was like, it's a fait accompli. And then there was all these other labs going. And a lot of the transformers literature on how to do this was kind of publicly known. So now is a kind of engineering task to scrape vast data sets, push it through architectures that. So it was obvious then that there was going to be lots of models. So there's going to be all these models competing against each other, and there's investors throwing so much money at this. This is going to move fast. But another major leap was, and I think Anthropic did a really smart thing here. They recognized that code is highly structured tokens. And in general, prose and literature, there's less structure. But in software code, it's very highly structured. So the predictability is greater. And when you see how some of the new models can generate code so fast, that now this is a change in gear, because you can generate code that will generate new data and new insights. And now you've got executable software code that is like another level of speed and advancement, because now we can move the whole software industry faster. So it's like I might be in a world of AI 25 years, but I find it very hard to predict where it's going to be in the next year or two, because there's so much resources and things are moving so fast. But the software industry is going to be changing quickly. I think it's foolish to almost predict what's going to happen. Just it's in everyone's interest to be moving quickly with it. Don't try and swim against that current. It's
because you'll be wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's take a quick time out and give a shout out to one of our sponsors, Rapido Solutions Group. Rapido connects logistics and supply chain organizations in North America with the best nearshore talent to scale efficiently and deliver superior customer service. Rapido works with businesses from all sides of the logistics industry, which includes brokers, carriers, and logistics software companies. Rapido builds out teams with roles across customer and carrier sales and support, back office administration, and technology services. The team at Rapido knows logistics and people. It's what sets them apart. Rapido is driven by an inside knowledge of how to recruit, hire, and train within the industry, and a passion to build better solutions for success. The team is led by CEO Danny Frisco and COO Roberto Icaza, two guys I've worked with from my earliest days in the industry at Coyote. I have a long history with them, and I trust them. I've even been a customer of theirs at Molo, and let me tell you, they made our business better. In the current market where everyone's trying to do more with less and save money, solutions like Rapido are a great place to start. To learn more, check them out at gorapido.com. That's gorapido.com. Now, let's get back to the show.
It's so interesting. And one of the things you said I'm curious about, you mentioned how it almost was like unfathomable to go that far on the x-axis with the compute power. Like you almost couldn't like reasonably guess if you were to do that, what would happen. Now that you've seen that play out, I'm curious if you were to go back in time a few years and someone gave you like this unlimited compute power, would you expect that you would go down the same path that OpenAI went, where like it's a lot about search and ingesting all this data so that guys like me can just plop a question in and get every answer I need right in front of me? Or do you think there may have been other uses that are more interesting or applicable if you had that much compute power?
It was the problem to go after, for sure. Because the founder of our AI research lab, that's Eugene Freuder. This is the guy who came from the US, and he said the vision for AI was declare the problem you want solved, and AI will figure out a way. But there's a lot of AI researchers looking at different aspects of intelligence. Like there's I'd say there's the real world of robotics and the physical world interacting. And that's a subfield of AI. There's optimization, which is modeling combinatorial structures and finding the best combination of things to do. There's learning and adaptation, and then there's language. So I don't think that most AI researchers fully appreciated the power of understanding language, because I would say there was a maybe it's that researchers tend to be rules abiding, right? There was an assumption that you couldn't just go into the library, rip the covers off all the books, toss them into a machine that ingests every piece of data, throw every copyright rule out the window, and just harvest the entire sum of human knowledge written on every book and everything on every internet web page, script, everything. I think university researchers would have had a natural, but you'd be breaking laws. I'd say most people I've seen criticize modern AI have been some computer scientists and researchers who said, but you can't do that. That's against the rules. And it's like, well, it's done. It's done now.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is like someone had to be willing to just pretend the rules didn't exist to make something this gargantuan and substantial and meaningful happen. Because if we follow the rules, it'd be 30 years before we were even talking about a path.
That's why it didn't come out of Europe. We're more of a rules-abiding culture here. So it needed a combination of, they had fantastic AI researchers on their doorstep in Stanford, but there was a lot, I would say, lots of AI researchers around the world, but they probably needed to go to Silicon Valley to get the capital. So you need a lot of money and a lot of compute resources, and the appetite to go after something really big. And I would say an American culture of just let's get shit done and go for it, right? And it's done now. And I think everyone in the world can now look and go, yeah, okay, rules are broken, but there's so many benefits to this that the world isn't going back to pre-LLM days. It's now like, let's just work with this and find a way. And maybe there's got to be some type of compensation. I'm sure there will be some some lawsuits, no doubt, going on. So, but it's almost like this is too good and too valuable for humanity, and that we've got to accept that when you combine this with LLMs pointed at software code bases and to generate new code and the harnesses around this, like Claude Code. There's going to be more Claude Code. The irony of developing a tool like Claude Code is that you can use a tool like Claude Code to build Claude Code harness, right? So it's funny how their only moat really is speed and how fast. How long can they keep running this fast? Because as soon as they slow down, somebody else is going to go, hey, you know what? We've got a Claude Code look like this and can do something just as good, or it's got some kind of unique advantages. So I don't know what that'll be, but whatever it is, you got to look at it and go, oh, how can we leverage this now and use it more effectively?
So I think it's reasonable. The structure you talk about, where the kind of American way of just put your head down and go and see what happens, and when you're willing to try new things, good things happen. This is true. There's another side to that, though, and I've seen it. One of the benefits of the business we built was we did that. We were like, let's just run as fast as possible, take off, and see what happens. And there was so much good with that. We got to hire a ton of people. We grew really fast, but there was slippage. There were issues. There were things that did not run as effectively because you're moving that fast. Yeah. There's always that other side of the coin that's like, when you go this quickly, it's just natural to expect that there are more issues on the backside that you're not managing perfectly because you're focused more on speed and growth than anything else. Now, add in, we're talking about maybe the most powerful thing to ever be built. I think it's reasonable to assume that the downside is just as potentially powerful and fearful. And I'm curious, like, what is your general take on, like, our fear should be of the negative potential outcomes of all of this.
Yeah, there's definitely. I think with any major technological advances, there are downsides, right? But if you look back in the history of mankind, when there's been major advance, like say the Gutenberg press, there were monks in monasteries going, "Oh, lads, we're going to lose our jobs. Who's going to write all this stuff down?" Right? There was people who lost, but almost like those stories are lost in history because everyone moved on. There was society became more productive. There was more things we can do. Like we look back on the age pre I would say ChatGPT and say software was very expensive to build in that era. We didn't have enough of it because it was expensive to build. It became cheaper to build, so we're going to have more software embedded in more of what we do. And if you look in the freight industry is definitely one that can benefit more from intelligent systems, right? And so we're going to see, like, what I'd love to see, and like, there's a downside in that. I'd say the downside in freight will be that some will get cut out if they're not good at what they do, and they benefited from the fact that shippers were not good at interrogating who should they be dealing with, who's good at their job here. If you're not good at your job, you'll get discovered now. So I would say that's a good thing overall. From a societal perspective, the small players who are good at their jobs will find it easier to get into markets and start a business with a small number of trucks and start serving the big guys, because now the big guys don't rule you out because you're below a certain scale. It's just that if you do these 2 lanes really well, that's all we need. Just do these 2 lanes really well and keep doing them well, and you'll keep winning. And that, to me, that's economic efficiency, and that can be enabled by intelligent systems. Because you look at a Walmart or a big shipper, like the only way they could deal with mom and pop shops for a handful of lanes is that if the intelligent systems are running the decision making around who to give business to, and if the rules are if it's well designed and integrated with operational performance systems on the back end, that can keep winning. All you have to do is keep doing your job well, and you shouldn't have to be updating your bids to all the time. You should be just saying, this is what it costs me and this is how well I can do, and I'll keep doing it. And that's it. It's beautiful then. It's like, you don't need too many middlemen if someone's good at doing their jobs and the systems are set up to facilitate that. Will there be job losses? Yeah, almost certainly, but I think there'll be more jobs created than jobs lost. That tends to be with any major productivity enhancements, but we just don't know what those new jobs will look like exactly.
So that's the point right there that I want to dig in for just one more minute on, because what you said, I understand. And there's another example I remember. It was like 500 years of history shows that any new advancement always results in more opportunity and more jobs than those lost. However, it is way easier for humans to understand and digest seeing what you'll lose that already exists versus imagining what will be created that doesn't yet exist. Now, I understand that, why it's so hard to like envision what doesn't yet exist. I think the example I remember reading about was maybe the sewing machine, and when that was created, how like, some queen in Europe was like, get rid of that thing. Like, we'll lose too many jobs. But so much was, created as a result of that. My challenge, or what I think about it, is like, we're creating this technology that is theoretically going to be better than humans at many of the things that we're going to ask it to do. And it's so far and wide, and the scale is so grand that I'm like, is there really enough opportunity to create all these new jobs to counter that which will be lost? And again, maybe it's just true that because it doesn't exist yet, my brain is struggling to see it. But part of me worries that the amount is so staggering that there really isn't a replacement rate that can support that.
I think the best corollary is the Industrial Revolution or Agricultural Revolution, right, where so many jobs were on farms. Like, I think if you go back to America 150 years ago, something like 90% of jobs were on farms, or there's some. But when a tractor came in, the number of jobs just decreased so fast, right? So I would say that's probably one to look at and say, well, what happened in those cases? And say when the cars came in, blacksmiths disappeared, and you care for the whole, I would say, equine industry, a huge employer. So I would say, I suppose, economic historians will probably be able to tell us how do those people adapt. And I think there's a natural concern that this is such a revolution that's happening so fast across so many industries. Will we be able to adapt quickly enough to avoid major social upheaval? I can't say for sure. I don't know. I think that we have to accept that maybe there will be trouble from this. But what I suspect is that we're underestimating some of the like AI looks like it's really good at developing new software, but where it does it in smaller scale, like it mini blocks. But putting those blocks together when you don't know what's inside the block, that's kind of challenging. And that there's I would say greater skill around architecture needed now to put. It's almost like building sites had all these small breeze blocks, and somebody's after coming along with a giant block and placing, just one big block to make a wall. But now it's like, okay, how are we going to build this very large monument with fewer blocks that are not necessarily as flexible or as malleable as the older, smaller blocks were? It's going to have new challenges, and I suspect that there's new roles around software architecture, for example, that in putting intelligent systems together and how to get creative. And there will be a new premium on systems thinkers, those who can look at a multiplicity of different systems. You can build the individual systems quickly now, but piecing them together in a way that solves a problem better, and envisioning a multi-step process of building a larger system with more of these blocks. It's gonna give us more options. We're going to see more solutions on the market, but it's hard to predict. We're going to see that 2026 is just going to be a fascinating year, right? That's for sure.
So you're obviously in an interesting position as one of the original AI researchers, but it sounds like even for you that there's been this kind of epiphany moment in the last 12 months where it was like, okay, things are changing now and they're going to change very rapidly. I'm curious as a business leader, how do you navigate was there a moment where it was like, hey, we need to stop what we're doing and think about our overarching strategy and how we're going to change how we run our business moving forward?
Yeah, there was, and I would say that was the first week of January when I started playing around with Claude Code, and for me that was like, wow, they've cracked a big nut here, and that even just playing around with that during the Christmas holidays, I could see that this means for our industry, in the software industry, this means we need to be building software in a different way. This will have knock-on effects in many industries, but first and foremost, I think the software industry is getting disrupted more than any other industry. So ourselves in the software industry are the example to others of this is how it might play out. And the software industry is I would say it's a new industry, so it's quite adaptable. There's a few of the older, bigger guys, less adaptable. Suspect they're in trouble. But how we organize ourselves around new ways of working will actually be instructive to bricks and mortar businesses who will be able to lean on similar technologies to their advantage too. So I think software industry is going to be the case study for other industries and how to adapt in this new age of intelligent systems.
Holy That is what everyone says when they see Genlog's truck intelligence platform for the first time. Founded by ex-CIA operatives and fueled by 15 million daily images across a nationwide camera network, Genlogs gives you the power of total market capacity while also defending you against fraudulent carriers. Holy shit is what Genlogs customers say again when they see the ROI from covering loads faster with fatter margins. Holy shippers. That's right. Genlogs unveils the locations and lanes for all the shippers in America. In the era of artificial intelligence, nothing beats actual intelligence from verified by video data. See what Genlogs can do for you. Check out a demo at genlogs.io. Again, that is GENLOGS.io. Tell them Andrew sent you, and they'll include their carrier compliance suite for free. And if you haven't already, I interviewed their founder, Ryan Joyce, last year, and it's one of my personal favorite episodes that we've done. Check it out. Now, let's get back to the show.
And how hard is that? You know, your business has been around now for 13 years, and you know, every month it's like you've got your team and everyone's got their job and their responsibilities, and they show up to work every day. They know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Then one day Alan walks in January and opens Claude Code and says, "Holy cow, our business needs to change tomorrow." Like, how do you actually apply the kind of a mass, like, what was the actual process for saying we need to make changes to support this?
Validate that it was as big an event as we suspected, right? So first thing was, let's make sure because we've seen hype cycles in tech before. I've been through blockchain and trying to tell customers, we ain't blockchain. We're not Web3, no. NFTs, no. And there's been many of these where there was hype cycles and just ridiculous. But I knew this is different. This has been said before, right? But this one is different. But let's validate that. So we started to look at how this can be used in anger on tough technical challenges, and validating that this is the real deal, you know. So we did that, and we're lucky to have some really strong, I would say, technical leaders who are able to. And I think it's natural that some people will be skeptical about just how good it could be, because it sounds too good to be true. But then you test it out and you go, okay, right, you test it out on challenges you know are hard. And when it's able to solve those and do a really good job, you know, okay, all right, this does change everything. Then you got to make sure that you don't want to leave people behind at this, right? Because there's going to be in every organization, there's going to be people who want to jump on the latest thing. And sometimes you got to talk them down and say, hold on. First of all, validate this is for real. Then encourage them. Okay, let's have more examples. Let's encourage everyone. Because what you'd like to do is have everyone buy into it of their own volition. People, it's human nature that if you try to apply the stick instead of the carrot for adoption of new ways of working, that there's a danger that you've not brought everyone along and you won't make the best of what this could be. So we've been working hard on making sure that I think we've got everyone bought in. And in the space of 6 to 8 weeks, it's a lot to get done. You know, you're kind of saying that you've been building code a certain way for 10, 20 years. There's a new way now, and it's not like you won't ever code again. Because when I was talking about those big blocks, they're like piecing them together, architecting, judging how this should be built. It really benefits from people who are experienced at coding. Like, you put in someone who doesn't know how to code and start building. Like, I've been using Claude Code and I'm very rusty at coding. Right, so it's like 12 years ago I stopped coding. I don't produce good artifacts the way good coders produce good artifacts. It's kind of self-evident when you're looking at it. I don't buy into the belief that someone who doesn't have a clue how to code will do a very good job with this, because they just won't be able to see where the flaws are.
So the floor is raised for everyone, but in a world where excellence is what wins you business, like that's not solving your problem. You still need the best of the best in all these areas to create a great product.
Yeah, you do. I think what I'm expecting to see is that software companies start producing more products, and it's the biggest vendors who have a suite of modules that are interconnected. And they kind of built large software companies through acquisition. They're the ones that will be most challenged, because they very often they bought different companies, pieced them together. The user experience is very different in each of the modules. And now, say companies like us, where we were specialists, we can build things that are adjacent to what we do, but they could have the same user experience, the same design skills. So you can kind of have Claude build your software in a way that's consistent with how you built core pieces. And now you're going to see more software companies with more products. And so you're judged by how good those are, right? And how good was your judgment in creating the multiple modules in these new suites?
So I think that's a good path for me to then ask, like, when you think about Keelvar today versus where you see the business in, say, 3 to 5 years, what is the maturity? What is the development? What changes over the next few years in terms of how your business looks and engages in the market?
Yeah, I think we'll be doing much more for customers, in that we were specialized in sourcing, but many of our customers have been asking us for years, could you do these other things? And I'd say being disciplined and staying in your lane was the thing to do, the best thing to do when building good quality software was so expensive. You had to be very judicious, and it took more time. But now you've got to stay within the lane of your knowledge base, not the lane of where disciplined code creation restricts you. That it's imperative that before you tackle any adjacent problems, if you have a very good understanding of what pain point needs to be solved and how it should be solved, then you should solve it. So that, I would say, brings your 3 to 5 year plan into year one. It's almost like every software company's 3 to 5 year. If you didn't have a 3 to 5 year plan, you're in trouble. And I think there was lots of software companies that didn't have a 3 to 5 year plan. Like that, I do talk to other software leaders, and they're not necessarily thinking 3 to 5 years out, but this is a moment where if you haven't been thinking 3 to 5 years out, then you'll be throwing paint at the wall, and will be a telling year for what a coherent plan looks like.
Yeah. Is there a product or service that you can say that you think is like super adjacent to sourcing that like is a natural next step, or you still want to keep it on the down low?
I think that it's at our Connect. We're going to have a Keelvar Connect event in Dublin in June, and we're going to announce a range of new offerings there. But what we're planning to do is build adjacent application, but see what do our customers like or dislike. And if they don't like something, we just ditch it. We just say, okay. But if they really like it, then that will be the arbiter for whether we go, okay, push this. Because go to market for software is still expensive. You don't want to be trying to sell, or having products where your go-to-market team doesn't understand it fully and they can't sell it, and doesn't understand the market you sell into well. So even if So if code production costs have come down, the sales and marketing costs around it haven't necessarily. So be judicious about how you apply those kind of relatively expensive resources too.
Yeah. Staying on that kind of future thinking line of thought, what's something that you think, say, 5 years from now, just specifically in the freight procurement world, what do you think looks very different?
It's going to be much more like e-commerce in that it's machine-to-machine negotiations, but it's controlling agents on both sides. So the shippers are going to have agent managers who are seeing how their operations are running and kind of swarming on why there's failures and what you do and how you instruct your agents to avoid future failures, and this notion of anti-fragility, right? So the shippers very often, they'd like a self-healing system. So they want agents that are always learning from mistakes and making fewer and fewer and fewer mistakes and getting better and better at predicting potential black swan events or having robust networks so that when a black swan event occurs that you can heal your network fast. So anti-fragility on buy side is kind of a key long-term objective for, because I would say it's obvious that they're all moving in the direction of agents, but what's less obvious is that what should be the overarching North Star for those agents. What do they learn against? And that's anti-fragility, right? So then on the sell side, amongst the carriers, then you just want to be identifying your customers of choice and prioritizing that you should have agents that are optimizing the utilization of your fleet and you have a finite capacity available. Make sure you're dealing with the best customers or the customer you're serving the needs that suit your business and avoiding those needs they have that don't suit your business, and optimizing your network design with respect to the best customers. There will always be customers who don't adequately reward suppliers who do a good job and bias towards price. Avoid them, right? And that's the best way for them to learn is that they lose their best suppliers. So that's I would say, and that's the complementarity between agents on both sides of a market. That it can be win-win when there's reward schemes set up so that you incentivize the right type of behaviors.
So when I think about creating an efficient market or just an efficient network, it's important to have the most data possible from every side to plug in to create this network. And I'm curious, because this is something that's never been done. And I've asked a number of people about the concept, but you might be the perfect person to ask about it, given your business. I feel like any one of your large enterprise customers could become more efficient if there was a path to not just leverage their lane data, but also the lane data of competitors, or competitors may not be the right word, but other shippers and manufacturers who also have their own set of lane data and their own networks. And I'm curious if you see a path forward where the network of one shipper combines with the network of others to create these larger network effects, and if that's a role that your team plays.
That was, I would say, a topic for us in the AI research community 12, 13 years ago, was looking at how can you have combinatorial exchanges in which, let's say a carrier wanted A to B, B to C, C back to A, and there were three different buyers. Well, you would need to change the clearing rules around the auction and this is to move it towards what's called a form of combinatorial exchange, so that you clear it, you do synchronized clearing across multiple buy side. So
And by synchronized clearing, you mean you're confirming that the price on A to B is approved by shipper A. You're confirming that the delivery time for B matches up with the pickup time for the next location that's owned by, like, all of these rules need to be met, right?
You
That's what
got,
you're saying?
yeah, exactly. That the
Okay.
commercial terms and the operational terms are all met. So you've a satisfiable loop where utilization for that truck is optimized, and that there's a discount up. So that's the kind of alignment of incentives across all those actors. So you have shippers A, B, and C getting a discount because carrier A is saying, if I get that loop, I'll give you a discount. And it's the agents working that out, right? So no human in the loop, right? So it's just requests coming in on buy side and agents from the, I suppose, the trucking companies who are offering these type of conditional bids. That's how you use optimization to the max. But I would say there's quite a few things to get done as we head towards that level of efficiency. So it's not easy because one of the things is, like, buy side's going to get used to the fact that they can clear their spot bids in seconds. And if you're saying, well, now wait to clear on the hour, because we could have thousands of spot bids that we synchronize the clearing of and do this optimization across. If you were to do that, it's almost like the kid, and the same research is Thomas Sandholm, who is a researcher a professor in Carnegie Mellon University, who did quite a bit of work on this, on kidney exchanges, but also on combinatorial exchanges that could be applied to that type of, I would say, multi shipper optimization, multi carrier optimization, synchronized combinatorial exchanges. It's kind of like a holy grail, hard one to get to, but possible. But you're working towards it.
It does feel like no matter how efficient you can get in one shipper's network, it will always be less efficient than if you could find a way to add in another shipper to that network. But the path to get that closure, to make that executable, seems so gargantuan. And maybe that's why AI is like a perfect solution one day.
Yeah. And
but I was
it's
curious.
definitely moving in that direction, right? Because we're getting more and more shippers optimizing within their own kind of myopic level of optimization, but then to do the joint optimization, I would say there's no technical reasons why it can't be done. I would say there's more business reasons why it's hard to do that, hard to synchronize some of these challenges. So it needs volume too. It needs serious volume to work at scale.
Well, let me leave you with this, an easier question to end on. Just some advice. Actually, I'm going to ask you two questions, because one is for the general public. For the 22-year-old kid graduating college who wants to get into supply chain and the logistics industry, what advice do you have for them? From your own experiences, from what you're seeing in the market, on what they can do to best set themselves up to succeed in this world.
I'd say be curious about the new tools and teach yourself how to use these new tools. There's always slow learners out there, or people who are reluctant to adopt new tools that change the game in terms of efficiency. So when there's a big change like this, so many people are being negative, saying, oh, what will this do for graduates? I say, well, graduates are open-minded. Every graduate I've ever met has been open-minded about what tool to learn. It's people who've been stuck using certain ways of working for 5, 10, 20 years tend to be the people that will go, no, that'll never work. Because they have a bias towards feeling what they've learned thus far is something they've got to double down on and keep using as an advantage over new entrants. And to a graduate, use that to your advantage, right? That you can get things done faster if you use these new tools. So I'm always optimistic about the future for graduates, because I think that open-mindedness is the key to success.
I appreciate that. Last question, and this is more advice just for me or other people who might be in my boat. I've got, as of today, 229 days left on my non-compete. Brokerage is the only thing I've ever done. And there's a big part of me that wants to go start another brokerage in 230 days. Do you think that's a bad idea? Do you think it's too late to start from scratch in this brokerage world? That, one of the things you said earlier was like, it's the people in the middle who might have the most to worry about. That would be me. I'm curious your thoughts on
I
that.
think there's always opportunities here. I think there's just so many people will be too slow to adopt new ways of working, that if you find an angle with this new type of tool, you can build your own tools as well, of course, that you can find an edge, right? There's a disruption happening. So I'd say old relationships will start to break down. There will be big shippers and big trucking companies who just get stuck in old ways of doing things, and there will be a dislocation, and there's going to be opportunities. So it's actually a great time to be starting a business and challenging older norms. I don't know what the angle, but you obviously need to find an edge or an angle and do things differently. But I'd say go for it. If you got an itch, like I had an itch, just gotta scratch it. Sometimes you're scratching it, and 10 years later you're going, God, I'm still scratching this itch. It's never going.
Yeah. I think anyone who knows the exact number of days on a non-compete, they have an itch that still needs to be scratched for those that still count. So, I appreciate that insight, though. It's funny because when I think about it, when we started my business in 2017, the path forward was so clear. Like I understood what we needed to do. I understood what I thought our edge was. It was so clear. This time around, even if we operate the same way, the path just feels foggier. And I think that's true for so many people when they look at the future. It's so hard to see clearly what that looks like because we've never done this before. Any of us, even those who have studied it for 24 years, admit that they're learning new things. So it's a fascinating future. And I appreciate your mindset. That's like, if you're willing to see opportunity, the opportunity will be there. I think that's true of perspective. Yeah. Like, it's the half glass full versus half glass empty mindset. Totally. How you view the world is how the world is.
That's it. And exactly. And there's opportunities there. That's for sure. That's just, it can be, as you say, it can be harder to find them because it's a more complex world. The world was simpler 15, 20 years ago. The opportunity was like, you could just describe it in a nice little neat business plan. Now it's all about adaptability. I think that's just learning quickly, iterating fast, being open to saying my first premise was wrong, but I learned something new, changing direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you say that now, and it's like it reminds me of one of my co-founders, Will Jenkins, used to say this all the time when we were starting our business. The first 2 years, the word nimble was the most commonly used word by all of us. It was just like, hey, it was like something's happening, we have to change. It's like, we don't have a choice. Be nimble, like make the change and move forward. And I think if that's your mindset in business, you have such a leg up on the competition. And that's why these big companies struggle, is because making change, being adaptable is so hard because there's so much red tape. It's so hard to get things approved versus a startup. It's like, hey, I see something, go do it.
Exactly. Their inertia is everyone else's opportunity. That's the slightly bastardized Jeff Bezos quote. It's like, inertia is like the biggest killer of big businesses. So I can see them being a little fearful of AI and not really knowing how to leverage it effectively. Because I think most businesses have a challenge there.
Yeah.
Thank
you. Yeah. This has been really insightful. I feel like I've learned more in this 80-minute conversation that I have in a lot of these. No offense to the past ones. This one was just very insightful. So I just want to say thank you. And I think my audience will appreciate it as well. Hopefully you got
enjoy
some
the
out of it.
discussion, and yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you. And to our audience, we'll see you next time.
Bye for now.